I enjoy taking on new challenges, but I also have to be realistic and carefully consider whether I can handle that specific type of project. I do. When you're getting paid for a commission, you really want to deliver your best work. As I said, I enjoy taking on new challenges, but I also have to be realistic and carefully consider whether I can handle that specific type of project. If I have enough time to think it through, I usually try to find a way to make it work. But when deadlines are tight or the client's vision doesn't quite match mine, it can lead to results that aren't fully satisfying for either side. Managing those situations well is key. Once I take on a project, my focus shifts to meeting the client's needs as closely as possible. Another source of pressure is figuring out how to monetize my personal projects. It's something I need to do to keep my independent projects going in the long run. Even though I love what I do, it's still my job, so I need to make a living from it. On days when the weather's bad and I don't have to commute, I usually spend a lot of time just lying down, but when I need a change of pace, I love to go for a walk. Unfortunately, it's too hot for that now. It's August. When I have some free time, I also like to play games, but I also have to be careful because once I start one, it's hard to stop and it can get in the way of my work. So I don't get to play as much as I'd like. When I do play though, I usually go for The Legend of Zelda or Animal Crossing. They're my favorites. As I mentioned earlier, I enjoy taking photos and I journal and keep a lot of notes. When I start a new piece, I first decide on a theme and collect inspiration. I think about my mood of the day, whether the illustration will match the current season when I post it, and so on. I take all of that into account and decide what to work on. Then I plan the composition and start sketching. For work commissions, I begin by reviewing any project briefs or concept documents. If the details are clear, I'll often draw several sketch drafts to match the client's vision. Once the final composition is approved, I move on to the next stage. Since I focus a lot on the overall atmosphere, I usually add some basic coloring to the sketch before sending it over to the client. One thing that I find very important is making sure that the character is clearly visible. When people look at an illustration, they usually notice the character first, right? So I think about how the character's actions and expressions will stand out. After that, I consider if their surroundings feel natural and build the composition around that. The final layout is also influenced by the aspect ratio of the paper or canvas I'm working with. I'm pretty particular about the background too. When I draw illustrations, I like to depict characters that you might actually see in real life. That's why I tend to avoid overly unique outfits or hairstyles. While this approach can sometimes make the characters seem less distinctive, I prefer to keep things more grounded and relatable, unless that's part of the character concept. I usually draw inspiration from everyday life, so I naturally gravitate towards illustrations with everyday themes. I didn't really think much about whether others like this style, since I usually don't ask for direct feedback. But after attending a few illustration fairs recently, I overheard people at my booth saying that my characters looked like their friends, or that my backgrounds reminded them of places they'd been to. It was really nice to hear that people felt a connection to my work. Since then, I've become more mindful of incorporating realistic details into my art. Once I'm mostly done with the coloring, I always take a step back and look at the whole piece. I'll add noise, apply a noise filter to the background, and adjust the brightness and intensity separately for the background and the characters. It's all part of my usual finishing process. As a little post-work ritual, I also like to celebrate by having a drink. Well, when I was working on game characters, my focus was on making the characters stand out. I think a lot about how to make their poses, designs, and coloring cuter and more charming. These days, I approach my work and personal projects in different ways because they serve different purposes. For commissioned work, the goals are clear and I create the artwork to fit those specific needs. But with my personal projects, it's more about creating for myself. I enjoy drawing things I love, like seasonal landscapes or people I see while out on walks. I like for characters to blend in with their environments. While the characters are still the main focus, I've shifted away from drawing them in an extremely detailed way and now put more emphasis on the overall atmosphere. Through this process, my style has gradually evolved to reflect my current preferences. It was a bit of both. The change was necessary, but it also felt like a positive shift for me. As time passes, it's normal for your art, thoughts, and tastes to evolve. I spent a lot of time thinking about how to keep drawing enjoyable and sustainable because the last thing I want is to start hating it. That's why I decided to focus more on drawing what I love and sharing that. I'm also working on aligning my professional projects with what I'm passionate about. For digital art, I mostly work on a Cintiq and use Clip Studio. For journaling or doodling, I like using a felt tip pen. When I hit a creative block, I find it helpful to switch up my tools, so I'll experiment with different pens. I also use colored pencils, and when I need a change of pace, I enjoy watercolor painting as a hobby. When I create illustrations, I always aim for my work to be something that people can enjoy without having to think too deeply, just something that makes them feel good. I also try to make my art accessible and appealing to a wide range of age groups. I like to mix in real-life elements, whether it's people, landscapes, or familiar places, and sometimes even actual locations. I hope this makes my work more relatable. In many illustrations, characters are all really pretty and idealized, and it's the same in anime. When everyday scenes are animated, they can be transformed into something special. I want my art to have that effect too, making someone's ordinary life feel a little bit more magical or meaningful through the lens of an illustration. My goal is to create art that people can relate to and feel a personal connection with.